Hi everyone, my name is Rochelle and I'm here to welcome you to our virtual agent training session on the Master of Urban Design Planning and Master of Urban Design. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Program Managers Professor Marco Amati and Professor Graham Christ, who'll be able to tell us all about these programs. During our session, we welcome you to ask any questions you may have, as there will be a Q&A at the end of the session. And we also invite you to all say hello from wherever in the world you are joining us from in the chat box now. Before we start the presentations, we will begin, as we always do, with an acknowledgement of country. RMIT University acknowledges the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups across of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. RMIT University respectfully acknowledges their ancestors and elders, past and present. RMIT also acknowledges the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business. Okay, so we'll get started and I will throw it over to you, Marco. Thank you.
Thanks, Rochelle. And hi, everybody. I assume you can hear me okay, so that's great. This is an opportunity for me to talk to you about the Master of Urban Planning and Environment. I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to do. Oh, okay. I just about reconciliation. I mean, as Rochelle was talking about in the acknowledgement of country, we have a strong commitment to reconciliation in line with the ideas of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander self-determination. And what we're trying to do in this course and in our teaching practice is to embed reconciliation in everything that we do, in line with the principles of Bunjil, which is about knowing, working and being to support sustainable reconciliation and activate a relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous staff, students and community. Several words, I think, in this slide, which point to the idea of land use planning, which is inherently linked to the process of colonization and, in fact, the process of reconciliation. Land or country, as it's understood by First Nations people in Australia, is essential to survival. It's essential to ongoing sustainability. And I guess our commitment as a program is to try to embed these principles and introduce students at the minimum to a set of key vocabularies and grammar throughout the program as a whole. We do this in particular not just because of the university's reconciliation plan, but because we feel it relates to the students' employability. Increasingly, we're realizing that our students end up working for local government, state government, federal government even. All of these ideas of reconciliation are really important to understand when you're coming into an Australian working environment. So particularly for those international students that you as agents would be talking to and trying to recruit, I would be saying to you that sort of the RMIT's commitment to reconciliation is a really important part of its commitment to employability. Another sort of bigger context to our planning program, I guess, is relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Planning is planning is about the sort of arrangement of cities. It's about the arrangement of land. It's about ensuring that we can survive on the planet for as long as we can. And many of the goals that planners have around the arrangement of cities, around the prevention of pollution, are similar to those which are enshrined in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So at the moment, we're also trying to figure out different ways in which we can embed this kind of practice into our program as a whole. So those are the two big contextual factors about what Masters of Urban Planning and Environment, how it fits. But let's get on to the real specifics. So the program is accredited by the Planning Institute of Australia. This is the national body which basically advises or kind of represents professional planners who work in all kinds of different industries, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And the PIA, the Planning Institute of Australia, accredit only certain courses in Australia. And what they do is they come and review our programs every 5 years, and they basically give us sort of stamp of approval for the content that we're doing and the types of graduates that we're producing. Because of the PIA accreditation, then we have a limited amount of flexibility. We have 10 core courses, which are core and compulsory, because the Planning Institute expect us to produce graduates with a certain basic, a baseline of knowledge, and then 5 electives, which range across sustainability, housing, environmental policy, transport, green building, a whole range of different electives that students can take. We're very flexible in our approach. Basically, the electives can be done from anywhere in the university or outside even of RMIT. And the typical timeline for doing the course is between 2 and 4 years. So 2 years full-time, 4 years part-time. So this is the sort of the even more detailed, I guess, of the types of subjects that students would be doing. So in year 1, they would complete these 5 courses and then 3 electives. And in year 2, they would go on to perhaps, I guess some more theoretical and legal planning topics, as well as doing a research strategies course and an urban planning and environmental project. So the latter is a group capstone piece of work. But you know, that's just a sort of there's you could probably read from those titles that it's a very broad introduction to environmental and planning policy. The audience and who we aim, well, rather where we draw our students from, are a mixture of international and domestic students. Students typically have a related general degree, such as geography and architecture, and wish to specialize, but this isn't actually a requirement, but this is in general what we find. And of course, international students especially are wanting an entry point into the Australian job market. And we actively support this. So one of the things we're trialing next semester is to get students to work for local councils that are based outside of Melbourne using Zoom or Teams. In groups, they'll work on a predefined project as a kind of internship, and crucially for the students to be able to list on their CV that they've had a certain amount of experience working for X council. And that way, of course, they can build up their contacts and their networks in Australia. So for an international student, I think that's a really important aspect, is to ensure that the employability is taken care of, because they're, of course, investing a huge amount of money in their own education, and they want to see as quick a return as possible. With domestic students, it's pretty much the similar, but our domestic students tend to have work experience. They may already be working in industry. And so there's, as much as possible throughout the degree, we provide opportunities to mix the domestic and the international students so that one can be linked with the other and with their different sets of experiences. This is a little diagram. I mean, you'd be familiar with the dates for the first semester and the second semester. This is typical sort of layout of where the courses sit in the different semester in year 1 and year 2. But I should also point out that if students are keen and they want to do a minor thesis instead of the urban planning project, for example, if they want to articulate their degree into a PhD program or to go on to do some other sort of research, then that's completely possible as well. Okay, industry connections and work integrated learning. So we have a strong relationship with the Planning Institute of Australia. They're constantly contacting us with jobs and things that they want students to work on. We have industry lecturers throughout the course and an active student society who organize things like CV workshops and talks with industry leaders. We have a project-based online work integrated learning subject to connect groups of students to rural and regional local government. And we found that in the past, students have found work in all these different areas, from strategic and statutory planning through to conservation and community groups, local government, infrastructure providers, and so on. In addition, I should point out that the program is very closely linked to the Centre for Urban Research, which is RMIT's biggest centre for research and one of the country's leading areas of research on urban matters. There's several different research programs in there. You can see from these titles, and we draw on the expertise of colleagues from there very liberally and readily. And then finally, we also run, and we're internationally connected. We've run different field placements and courses. We've traveled in the past with postgraduate students from this program to Myanmar, to Barcelona, Germany. We'll be running one to Vietnam in January, and even placements and exchanges with universities in Europe and North America are possible. Okay, that's it from me. If you've got any questions, by all means, simply just email me or just Google Marco Amati at RMIT. And luckily, there's only one of me at RMIT, so my name's very distinct and easy to find. Yeah, and so over to Graham. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Graham Christ. I'm going to speak about the Master of Urban Design program, and maybe one of your questions today will be, what's the difference between an urban planner and an urban designer? And that's an ongoing question that people are figuring out. But one thing is, we are located in a design school. We will see those two occupations as somewhat complementary, but we'll be talking constantly about the central role of design in both architecture and in cities. So we are located in the School of Architecture and Urban Design, and you're probably familiar with the architecture program at RMIT. It's very famous. It's hugely well regarded internationally, and the Master of Urban Design grows out of that culture. So in many ways, we see urban design as a kind of a specialization of architecture, but also a broadening of our understanding of the built environment to the urban scale, and an engagement with disciplines like urban planning, property, and so on. But it carries that culture from the architecture program of design as an experimental activity where we find new knowledge through the spatialization and the design process. And again, so that's sort of methodologically, it complements, the way an urban planner might work. It's also very vertically integrated. This program is very vertically integrated with the architecture program from bachelor level through to the Master of Architecture, and a very well known PhD program which operates in design fields, in urban fields, design fields, through to design technology fields. So yes, within our school, there's architecture, the MUD that we've talked about, landscape architecture, the Master of what we call Master of Disaster, which deals with urban crises, interior design, various research classes which revolve around those disciplines, and again, a design-based PhD. So that probably tells you something about the flavor of what urban design is, in terms of being very closely connected to those design cultures. We are located here in the Design Hub, and the fact that we're in the middle of this urban campus, both our programs in the middle of this urban campus, is really important to us understanding the city as a living laboratory. Our campus is built from our alumni and some famous award-winning buildings, urban design projects, and the staff that teach into the design programs, particularly the studios, are active design practitioners. So this little text maybe helps to think about the differentiation between planning and urban design. Urban design is it's a non-accredited program, so in some ways it has a huge amount of flexibility to invent, in fact, what it is and which direction you take it. We would also say that we foreground the decision-making process via design and spatializing and using, if you like, design modeling as an experimental tool as opposed to policy. As I mentioned before, so we build the faculty out of active design practitioners. Our PhD candidates are nearly always active design practitioners, and many of those become faculty within the program. A number of them are architects. I'm an architect myself. About half of all urban designers in Australia, people who call themselves urban designers, are architects, and they come from other allied fields like planning, like landscape architecture, and so on. Eva Prats, you can see here, is a world-renowned architect in Barcelona and has been running a studio in the urban design program for a number of years. She's just one of many examples. And she's an architect with a very, very strong urban sensibility, particularly about her hometown of Barcelona. So the design studio is central to the structure of the program. It's central to the structure of the architecture program and urban design. Many of the studios are co-offered into the MArch and the MUD program. So you get a very rich mix of students working on a project together. And it gives you a huge amount of choice in terms of the direction that the studios take and the direction that the faculty take at each semester. Here's an example. So Professor Mark Jakes, who's a landscape architect, who calls himself an urban designer now, has been running the foundation studio in the MUD for a number of years and focuses very strongly on Melbourne as a living laboratory and relates it to live projects that he's working on in practice. There's an important thing to say that our cohort is a mixture of students with if you like, a non-cognate degree and a background that's not in design or an undergraduate degree, but also very commonly a postgraduate positioning from architecture, in which case the program is a one-year duration. In other words, if you come in with an architecture degree or a landscape architecture degree, you go straight into the second year of the program, and you focus on the last 3 studios of the program, which I'll show you the map in a minute. Students who come in for a kind of a foundation year and to do the 2-year duration have introduced to the design studio from the ground up and gain new design skills very, very quickly. So this is a program map of the 2 years, and you'll see the black boxes are important there. They're the design studios. They're always the focus of the project work. And there's two studios in the first year, and then there's 3 in the second year. So we do 1 in Asia, 1 in Melbourne, and 1 in Europe. Most often our Asia studios have gone to Vietnam, but not always. This year it's in Korea. And then the Europe studio is most often in Barcelona again, but not always. And where we've been constrained by COVID, we do that virtually. So Eva Prats has been in Barcelona and run the studio online for the students who can't travel. And then those studio courses are augmented by a series of skilling up seminar-based courses, Asian urbanism, so sort of a contemporary history program, a professional practice course, and then in the second year there are more specialized urban design courses, case studies in urban design and eco-urban practices, a strong focus on the sustainable city. And then there are some electives drawn from outside of the program to, again, to broaden and engage with fields like planning, like property development, and so on. So in many ways, those 3 studios in the second year are the kind of the capstone project experience. Okay, I'll race through that, but I guess we're both really keen for questions.
Yep, thank you so much, Graham and Marco. If anybody has any questions, could you just please enter them into the chat box now, and we'll be able to get those answered for you.
I should say too, like Marco, my email address is very easy to find. I'm the only Graham Christ in the world, I think. And I'm happy to take your emails too, or chat now.
Thank you, Graham. Very kind of you. I think we've got a few people typing in now, so we'll just give it a minute or two for the questions to come through. Okay, I've got a question, thank you, from who's asking how many new students commence each semester usually?
Is that for either of us, both programs?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Our program is tiny. It's about a dozen students in each year cohort, but it sits within a much larger field of architecture students, of which there are about 500. So in some ways, we're the boutique of the big architecture program, and there's a strong connection between them.
Okay, thanks for that. Yep, thanks for that, Graham. I think Marco might have had some issues. He's just, I can't see his video there, so we'll get back to you with his response soon. But yeah, thanks for answering that, Graham. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I should say that number of a dozen is not, it's not a cap, it's just a relatively new program and a relatively boutique program. And so we're not confronted with it growing yet, but anyway.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Oh, that's okay, Marco. Yeah, Marco has had a few connection problems. Fortunately, we were able to hear his presentation all okay, which is great. Yeah, and I think you both might have answered everything because it doesn't look like there's too many questions coming through in the chat. I
was just going to say, either of us are happy to take a follow-up email if there is something very specific you want to ask.
Yep.
Or take it offline.
Oh, Marco's managed to actually answer that in the chat as well for you, And just wait and see if there's any other questions. Okay, I think that looks like it might be it. Actually, a few people typing, might just give it a few more moments. It looks like has another question. She's asked, when we submit an application for the Master of Urban Planning, what is the criteria to be considered from the selection officer?
Yeah, that's quite an easy question to answer. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's 2.5 GPA. So that's 2.5 out of 4, which is a credit average. but we don't have any specific subject requirements. So we'll take students from a whole variety of different disciplines.
Great, thank you so much for answering that, Marco.
I should also mention something about I didn't say it, but recognition of prior learning is also
yes.
a potential aspect of the program. So we actually do recognize if students have a significant amount of work experience, maybe in their home country, then they can basically apply to have those credited. Yep. So we do that as well as part of the entry process.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I think that's all the questions we've received through the chat. So just once again, just really wanted to thank you, Marco and Graham, for taking the time to join us today, and also to everyone who has been able to join us live. And just to let you know that you'll also be able to access a recording of the session as well. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.